Welcome everyone to the Over Under Movies podcast show where we take a prominent figure of franchise in the world of filmmaking and ask a simple question. Are they overrated or are they underrated? My name is DeAngelis. I am joined as always by my co-host. He is the Agent J. It's my Agent D for this episode, Mr. Jason Gong. Jason, how you doing today?
I'm great, Dylan. How are you?
Doing fantastic. It's we're recording this the day of the Oscars. It's also daylight savings. We're a little out of whack, but we're going to power through it for this one. As I alluded to in the intro there, we are talking about the 1997 hit film Men in Black, starring Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones. Listen, Jason, we were doing a game night a couple of nights ago, and we were like, let's just throw in a flick, something that we know is going to be enjoyable. And I recommended Men in Black.
Yeah.
And this is a movie that is amazingly 27 years old at this point.
Wow.
Which is absurd because it's a film that holds up incredibly well in 2024. Like, I feel like this is a movie, again, like, it's tough for us to judge this because we're dudes in our 30s. But I feel like people of any age can watch this movie nowadays and be like, this is a really good movie. It's solid. It was the third highest grossing film of 1997. 1997, of course, was the year of Titanic. Number two was Jurassic Park, Lost World. It almost beat out Jurassic Park. I think it actually might have beat Jurassic Park domestically because this movie made a lot of money domestically. Spawned a bit of a franchise, Men in Black 2, Men in Black 3, which came out, I think in 2002 to 2012. So it took a while for them to make the sequels to it. They tried to do a soft reboot of this franchise a few years ago with Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson called Men in Black International. That movie flopped really fucking hard. So it's possible that this franchise is dead in the water a little bit for now, but I'm curious what you thought upon like rewatching it. I hadn't watched this film in a while personally, but I thought it held up really well.
Yeah, I haven't seen this film since I was a kid. And when I was a kid, I'm sure I saw it like 2 or 3 times at least. But a lot of that was like catching it on cable and stuff. So this was maybe the first time I've sat down and watched it like top to bottom.
Oh, yeah, just like straight through the entire movie?
I think so. Or like my parents rented it from Blockbuster and were watching it, and then I would sit down in the middle and watch it. I don't know. But yeah, this movie is great. It's an hour and 37 minutes or something like that.
Yeah, it's tight movie.
Very tight movie. Like, we're usually happy with an hour 45, so an hour 37 is just like a bonus.
Yeah, this movie feels like an absolute breeze, and it's not like a super complicated film, despite the fact that the premise is a little complicated. For anybody that doesn't know, Men in Black is about a secret organization operating all extraterrestrial activities on planet Earth. And they wear like just standard black suits. And they have a cool little device called a neuralizer, which we'll talk about the neuralizer later, because I think it's like one of the most broken devices in any movie that basically erases like people's short-term memory. So they're able to keep everybody in the dark about the aliens while they're not like crime fighters per se. Like they're like regulators. They're like IRS agents. And Tommy Lee Jones plays like this like grizzled old veteran. He's Agent K. And Will Smith is an NYPD cop who gets recruited by Tommy Lee Jones after he stops a guy that he wasn't aware was an alien, but he like was able to chase down an alien on his own. He later becomes Agent J, and then they have, it's a buddy cop movie from that point. It's a buddy cop movie with aliens. It's great.
Yep. And all a buddy cop movie needs to do to be fun is have good chemistry between the leads. And this movie has that. I think Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones were great together.
Yeah, which is interesting because, I mean, I guess we can start with Tommy Lee Jones. He's not like an actor that's been in like tons of roles that people have seen him in. He's got several like very iconic roles, this one being one of them. He was a guy that was a bit of a working actor for most of his career. And then throughout the 90s, like he started getting like big budget film roles. He had been Two-Face in Batman Forever, which I think came out in 95. So like that was like his big like breakout into like, a huge superhero movie. And then probably his biggest like Oscars film was No Country for Old Men, which is in 2007. Like really interesting turn for him. Do you know how old Tommy Lee Jones was in this movie? This is like for anybody that doesn't know, this is like a running joke that I make when we watch movies. We'll see like a guy that looks like a little rough around the edges, and it'll be a movie from 30 years ago, and I'll be like, this guy was 32 when this movie came out.
I'm not sure how old he was. I'll say 58.
Yeah, he was 51.
Wow.
So yeah, he looks old.
51.
He's one of those guys that he's just been old in any movie you've seen him in. Nobody knows what young Tommy Lee Jones looks like. But yeah, I thought he was really good in this movie. And it's it's interesting because, yeah, he's not just the grizzled guy. He's also got like a silly side to him that you see like every now and then throughout the film. And I think that's good. I think it's nice that like you get to see Will Smith like pulling him out of his shell a little bit. I think that buddy cop dynamic's really interesting.
Apparently it was the other way around. I was reading that Tommy Lee Jones didn't like a lot of the dialogue, so he would be the one to ad-lib and improv, and Will Smith would be catching up to him.
Oh, that's interesting because obviously Will Smith, he's coming off of Fresh Prince. This is like as Will Smith is becoming a big movie star. In 95, he was in Bad Boys. 1996, he was in Independence Day. And this is 1997. So like this is...
Wow, what a hot run.
This is Will Smith becoming Will Smith right here as a movie star. Unfortunately, he's 2 years away from saying no to a little movie called The Matrix and instead doing Wild Wild West, but we don't need to talk about that. But yeah, their dynamic's great. One of my favorite things to talk about in these podcasts, Jason, is people that were almost in these roles. We could talk about the production a little bit later here, but the studio's first choice for the role of K was Clint Eastwood.
Okay, I could see it.
Which I think Clint Eastwood would probably be just as good as Tommy Lee Jones, if I had to bet. He's a good actor.
Yeah.
That would have been a different movie for sure. Maybe he didn't want to play opposite of a black guy. Who knows?
Jeez.
You want to take a guess of any hot up-and-coming actors that they wanted to play the Agent J role? Because Will Smith was not their first choice, believe it or not.
Keanu Reeves.
No, it was, in fact, somebody that knew Tommy Lee Jones very well, Chris O'Donnell, who had recently played Robin in the Batman movies.
That guy, I mean, his career, I don't know much else he's been in besides being Robin. It's unfortunate he wasn't able to take this job.
Yeah, I think he's one of those guys that Hollywood like tested him as like a big movie star when he was young. It didn't work out, and then he was just in like TV the rest of his life.
Yeah, I read this too, actually, and if I remember right, he actually turned the role down because he felt it was too close to Robin. He didn't want to be the sidekick character again.
Holy shit. What a missed opportunity.
Rip Bozo.
It's very, very tough look. The rest of the cast, Linda Fiorentino plays Dr. Laura Weaver. This is an actress that she's in like almost no other movies that I was able to find.
Dogma.
She's in Dogma. But yeah, she hasn't really worked much in the last like 10, 20 years. However, she's born and raised in South Philadelphia. So shout out to Philly native.
Good for her.
I thought she was good in the movie. It's nothing like crazy, but like for the female lead, I thought, you know, she was able to like hold her own against these two guys.
She does a good deadpan that I think really sells some of her jokes, like her reactions to learning there's aliens, and she's just so solemn about it, I think is really good, especially when that's contrasted with Will Smith's over-the-top reactions.
Yeah, she's playing a mortician, and she does a good job of playing the idea. Like, morticians, the joke about them is that they hang out with dead people because they don't like hanging out with alive people, and she was able to sell that pretty well.
Yeah, definitely.
And then the main villain of the film is the Bug Man / Edgar. He is played by Vincent D'Onofrio. An amazing physical performance by Vincent D'Onofrio in this.
Yeah, his physicality is great. Like, he really does look like he is a human suit being piloted by something that doesn't know how
by
to
a
pilot.
giant bug creature.
Yeah.
Yeah. And he kind of, it's crazy. He's been working for so long as an actor that he doesn't look anything like his like recent roles, like Kingpin or anything like that.
Yeah, he's pretty unrecognizable. Even at the start of the movie, before he gets taken over by the bug, he looked pretty different. But then like the small touches of makeup that they do to give him that like messed up human appearance, it's great. He's an iconic character for sure.
I guess we could talk a little bit about like the behind the scenes of this film, because when I was watching it, it feels a little bit like a ragtag like indie production at times, where it's like, oh, this is like a smaller movie that like really like broke out and made a ton of money. It wasn't really the case. It's directed by Barry Sonnenfeld, who had done the Addams Family movies in the early 90s. He worked as a cinematographer for the Coen brothers in the 80s. This is a guy that's like, he's done like all sorts of stuff in Hollywood. He directed the first 3 Men in Black movies, so he did the 2 sequels that came after this.
Did the third one too?
Yeah. The studio had originally approached, because the rights for this was bought in the early 90s when the comic came out. I guess we didn't talk about that yet. This is based on a comic book. Did you know this is based on a comic book?
Yeah.
Do you know anybody that's read the Men in Black comic book?
Well, it was like a small indie comic, kind of like the same way Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles started off as a comic that no one really read. But this comic series was owned by a company called Malibu, which was bought by Marvel. So eventually, a few more people started reading it.
Yeah, it was like a 6 issue series, and that was it. So very, very small comic series that was immediately adapted into a film. Like, they were trying to shop out the rights for this, like basically as soon as it came out. The two directors that they wanted to get for it in the mid 90s were John Landis, which is a tough look. The other one was a guy named Quentin Tarantino. They really wanted to get him to direct this. A Tarantino Men in Black film would have been a completely different movie.
I don't think he's ever directed like a non-R-rated movie, right?
Yeah, an R-rated Men in Black movie would be, I would watch it.
I'd watch it. I don't know if it will be better.
Some studio executive watched Reservoir Dogs and was like, oh, he can direct guys that are wearing suits.
Suits, yeah.
Basically the same thing. So this is distributed by Sony Pictures. Amblin Entertainment was one of the production companies for it, which means that Steven Spielberg is executive producer. Steven Spielberg, really good pals with a guy named George Lucas. Mm-hmm. So George Lucas's company, Industrial Light and Magic, ILM, they worked on the special effects for this movie. Okay. They did a lot of creature work, obviously Star Wars creature work. So they got one of the main guys that worked on the original Star Wars. His name is Rick Baker, who, if you look at Rick Baker's IMDb, it's just like, it's so many movies, it's just an absurd amount of movies. He's worked on like visual effects and like makeup and stuff like that. And it's a bit of an underrated element of this movie is the creature effects. There's a lot of practical effects in this movie. The very end, there is a CGI fight between the Big Bug and Will Smith. But interestingly enough, they did have a big animatronic for that bug, and they just like, they scrapped it. They were like, we want to go with a more dynamic fight, and we need CGI for that.
Yeah.
But I think in general, like the designs of the aliens are really cool.
Yeah, I think so too. I think when we were watching it together, we were kind of debating, like, is this CGI or is this practical? Which means that if they're practicals, they're really good practicals. It's just really good.
This is right on the border between everything being practical and everything being CGI.
It's a couple years after Jurassic Park. It's the same year as Jurassic Park 2. Yeah, this is a good time to see that transition. Do you know if they started using a lot more CGI in like the second one?
I didn't look too much into the sequels, but I know Rick Baker had like a lot of problems behind the scenes with Spielberg and with like the producers on the film because they were always going back and forth between alien designs. He wanted to like more absurd alien designs because he was trying to think of it practically like, oh, if I'm designing an alien, like, why does it need to be bipedal? Why does that have to have eyes? Like, why can't I be more abstract with it? And basically the producers are like, shut the fuck up, just give it eyes.
Yeah, I could see that being the case. But there's a good range of aliens in this movie too. So I'm sure you got to mess around a little bit and have some fun.
Yeah, and then of course you have the aliens that look just like weird people. Mm-hmm. And then you have the alien that's just a pug that talks.
Yeah, Frank. He's great.
Really good music. Also, I was trying to focus a little bit more on the music because we saw in the opening credits that Danny Elfman did the score for this.
That's right, yeah.
Danny Elfman had like a really funny story of, I think he was working on like Batman Forever or something like that, or he was working on something on like a nearby lot. And he was talking to Tommy Lee Jones, and then like he got a call that like he was hired to do Men in Black, and he had never like tried to like do this movie. They basically just told him you're doing the music for it.
That's funny.
Which is cool because good for him. This movie was nominated for 3 Academy Awards. We are recording this podcast on the day that the Academy Awards are happening. You want to take a guess of the 3 Oscars this movie is nominated for?
Are there any like surprises in there?
No, not really.
Okay. So like
there's no Tommy Lee Jones, Will Smith. No.
The effects, sets, costume design,
makeup. They won for makeup.
Good,
which is cool. So that's that's Rick Baker and his little group. So he won an Oscar for doing this movie for the makeup effects, which I think is warranted because if you're watching a movie in 2024 that came out in 1997 and you're sitting in there going, is that CGI or is that practical? And probably a lot of it's practical, considering it would be like absurdly expensive to do really good CGI back then. Oscar worthy. It was also nominated for Best Art Direction, which. It's very much like kind of like brutalist designs of like the interior of the Men in Black, like their building. It's very like interesting style. And the movie's set in New York City. Apparently, New York City was not like the original choice for the screenplay. Apparently, the screenplay was like all over the place where this film was going to be set. Where else would you have set this than New York City?
Yeah, that's where the aliens would go, I think.
Specifically, the director, he had said that he, quote, felt New Yorkers would be tolerant of aliens who behaved oddly while disguised, which is exactly true. New Yorkers are the most like unbothered people on the fucking planet. There could be like a person on fire sitting next to them on the subway, and like they just got their AirPods in. They're just vibing.
Yeah. I think this was a great place to set the Men in Black and where all the aliens go.
I thought their Oscar nomination was for best score. So Danny Elfman got nominated for this score.
Nice.
Very interesting.
Who did who beat them in the 2 categories they lost in?
I didn't look at who beat them out. It's probably Titanic, honestly.
Yeah, that's what I figured.
It's Titanic. It's like, what did it lose to? Probably Titanic.
Yeah, I think it would be fun if Men in Black beat Titanic in any category. I'll look into that after this.
Yeah, I wonder if it beat it in makeup.
Yeah, it's possible.
It's possible that Titanic was nominated in just every category that year. It was one of those years. This movie had a budget of $90 million and made about $600 million.
That's crazy.
At the box office.
For that time period, that's so much money.
It was also, I don't know if this is true, but it is on the Wikipedia page that this movie did not turn a profit, which is the most Hollywood bullshit thing I've ever read in my life.
They're cooking the books if they're saying they didn't make profit.
Yeah. If you can't make profit off of that box office return, like you need to fire your accountants.
No, they're just lying to get out of paying like taxes.
Now, have you seen the sequels to this movie?
I've seen 2 and I've seen International. I didn't see 3.
So yeah, 2 basically has like Will Smith doing like an adventure on his own. Unfortunately for our local girl Linda Fiorentino, she's like written out of the second movie. I don't know if anything happened behind the scenes with that, but
so she says that she had scheduling conflicts. But again, we haven't seen her in any of the movies. And then I read, and this is unconfirmed, that she and Tommy Lee Jones did not like each other.
Yeah, scheduling conflicts is the most like bullshit excuse for anything in Hollywood, right?
Especially on a movie that made $600 million. Like, you're going to get out of your other schedule.
Like if you're working, you got a busy schedule. It is what it is. Mm-hmm. Very tough look. But part of the movie is Will Smith trying to like unneuralize Tommy Lee Jones. Funny enough, the second one has like awful reviews, which is interesting. This movie has a 91% on Rotten Tomatoes, and then the second one is a 38.
That's a pretty big downgrade.
Which sounds like a significant... We'll have to watch the second one, because I don't remember it being that bad.
I felt like it was more of the same, honestly.
Yeah, and like I said, it was same director, so you'd feel like it wouldn't be that massive of a drop-off, but obviously it made enough money that it made a third one. Though it did... Part of the issue I think this franchise had of like becoming a franchise is that they took too long making the sequels. Like, if a movie is really successful, like, you make the sequel, like, 2 years afterwards. You don't make it 5 years afterwards, which is what they did between Men in Black 1 and 2. And then Men in Black 2 and 3 is...
like 10 years.
Is 10 years. And you've seen Men in Black International. I have not. So what's your quick, like, 2-minute review of Men in Black International? Why didn't it work?
That movie's terrible. It's just really boring. There's no stakes. There's a big twist at the end that you can figure out at the beginning. Because Chris Hemsworth and Tessa Thompson, they're the 2 leads.
Yeah, on paper they should work because we've seen them work.
Yeah, we've seen them work. Well, we've seen them work once.
One time.
Yeah. But they were good. It's got a good cast. I think Emma Thompson's in it. Like, it's got a stacked cast. It's Men in Black, but bigger. It's supposed to be good. And then you watch it and the whole thing just falls flat. Like, the buddy cop elements aren't as fun.
Yeah, because they're basically doing the same thing again, right? Is Chris Hemsworth is basically like Tommy Lee Jones, and then Tessa Thompson's like the new person.
Yeah, exactly. But they're like closer in age, so there's not as big of like a dichotomy between them. You can tell that whoever cast these 2 people just wanted them to come on set and riff and have fun, like in Thor Ragnarok. And that's like a lot to like try and build your movie around.
It just seems like a miscalculation. It reminds me a lot of the Ghostbusters reboot that they tried, the female Ghostbusters reboot they tried to do, which also has Chris Hemsworth in it, who's just riffing.
Oh, so maybe he's the
common denominator is the issue. Which is crazy because on paper, this series should work as a franchise because it's a cool concept and you can just pull stories out of it.
Yeah, endless adventures you can have with aliens. Like, there's billions of planets and stuff.
I saw that like the original pitch for this movie is the French Connection with aliens.
Oh, that's badass.
So you just do some sort of like neo-noir, like, you know, buddy cop detective story. We watched Who Framed Roger Rabbit recently as another one that's just like a neo-noir type film.
Yeah, I think that might be why International failed as well, because they tried to scale up and you can't really do like a neo-noir film if you're globetrotting.
Yeah, it's one of those things where it's very tough, right? Try to go bigger and badder with your sequels, but like if you just keep it grounded, then like that's how the best sequels in history like happen, is that you like understand what made the first one work, and then you just like you build on top of it a little bit, but you just you keep what people enjoyed about the first one, which is very tough because I really wish that we would have gotten like more like quality Men in Black films. We'll have to watch the second one again because I remember the second one being good. It's unfortunate that it just got like completely railed.
Yeah, I remember it being pretty good too, but I think I was 8 when it came out. Speaking of Men in Black sequels, did you know that? Do you remember when North Korea hacked Sony? Like 2014. Do you remember when the movie The Interview came out?
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
And North Korea got mad. So
Seth Rogen.
Yeah, they hacked Sony and leaked all their emails to the public, which is crazy that a country had beef with a movie studio and just did that. So Sony was in very, very, very early development to make a Men in Black 21 Jump Street crossover where those 21 Jump Street characters would have to go join the Men in Black, and that was going to be the 4th Men in Black film.
That's very interesting. I have not seen the 21 Jump Street movies. I know that people like them a lot.
They're good.
Is that Lord and Miller that did those? Yeah. So that's like the movie that people point to where it's like, hey, these guys can make a really good live action movie. Yeah,
exactly.
Pay no attention that got fired from the Han Solo movie.
Yeah, I think it would have been fun because 21 Jump Street is just a buddy cop film, and then putting those characters into alien situations would have just been a good time.
Yeah, it definitely would have been silly, but that's kind of the point of Men in Black, is that it's a little silly, even though they're trying to like take it seriously for the most part. I don't know. Men in Black and Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles crossover, that might be something.
I'm surprised that hasn't happened in the comics yet. Like, I know that they're not owned by the same studios, comic book studios, but still, you get crossovers like that all the time.
Has Men in Black had any like major comic crossovers with major characters?
I don't think so. I think even when Marvel bought them, they didn't like add them to their universe or anything.
Yeah, it seems like a missed opportunity.
Yeah, I know that after this movie came out, I think they started publishing some comics that actually featured like Agents J and K, because the original comics like are very different from the movie, to my understanding, and the Will Smith character and the Tommy Lee Jones character aren't really in the original comics. But after the movie came out, then they started publishing new comics featuring the characters
with like the same likeness of those two guys.
Yeah, relatively. I don't think they owned the likeness, but it was an old white man
and a black guy.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see him pop up in Avengers Secret Wars.
Yeah, I mean, they are part of the Marvel multiverse in some capacity. That's true.
All right, anyway. Well, speaking of superheroes, the most broken like superhero tool in this franchise is the neuralizer. I want to talk about the neuralizer. Is it too OP? Because it's kind of, it is one of the ultimate like plot devices in a movie. The neuralizer, it's like a short-term memory eraser. It's got like little dials on it. Really cool, like practical prop that they have for it. You set the day, the year, months, whatever, and then you erase that person's short-term memory. Not only that, within like the short period after you neuralize them, you can like just like imprint on them like whatever you want, basically.
Rewrite their memories by giving them like a 2-sentence pitch of what you think they were doing at the time,
which is played for really great comedy between Tommy Lee Jones just giving like the most like basic ass shit stories, and then Will Smith trying to like build people up and give them like the coolest backstories imaginable.
Yeah.
I don't think in any of the movies the neuralizer is used to like as like a major plot point ever. Like it's just like a thing that they have.
In the second movie, at the very end, there's a neuralizer that's built into the...
Yes, the torch of the Statue of Liberty is a giant neuralizer.
Yeah, and so I guess they have to use that to wipe out the entire city of New York's memory for some reason. Again, I haven't seen this movie in a long time. But yeah, in that one, it's a pretty big plot point, I think.
Yeah, but like I'm just thinking of like, imagine if the bad guy got their hands on one.
Sure.
And we're using it to like erase people's memories or something like that. That would be really cool. I guess it's just one of those situations where it's a little, again, it's really OP.
Yeah.
So it just like, maybe it would just like made the bad guy win immediately. So you don't do that. We mentioned it in our our screening that we did a couple of days ago, we had recently done an episode on the Kingsman franchise, and we talked about the overlap. It feels like there's significant overlap between the first two Kingsman movies and the first two Men in Black movies. They feel like I'm guessing. I mean, who's the comic writer that does the Kingsman with Matthew Vaughn?
Mark Millar.
Like, it's possible these guys are just the fans of the Men in Black series.
Yeah.
And they're just taking a lot of elements from it.
I mean, I don't think none of those elements that are shared are particularly unique beyond these two movies. Like, the main premise is that an old guy recruits a young guy, and the young guy goes through this training session and recruitment period to join this secret organization, and then they wear cool suits and they fight bad guys.
And then the first movie ends with that old guy like leaving basically in some form. At the end of Men in Black, Agent K gets neuralized. He goes into retirement basically. I never caught this in previous watches of this film, but him like waking up from a coma and going back and like meeting that woman that he was looking at on his computer monitor. That's because Will Smith told him to do that, right? Yeah. I'd never caught that before. That's fantastic.
That is really good, yeah.
Because that's absolutely something that Jay would do. And obviously in Kingsman, Colin Firth gets shot in the head. And luckily for him, we have the technology to bring people back from the dead from getting shot in the head.
Yeah, so in both sequels, the young guy is trying to bring back the old guy's memory, and also the female character from the first film gets written out ceremoniously. Yeah, that's
there's something there with that. We'll do a little Venn diagram of all of the overlaps between the first two Men in Black movies and the first two Kingsman movies.
You're right. There are a ton of overlaps.
Because I was trying to think off the top of my head, like, is this just like the formula that you would do for this type of film? And I mean, I couldn't think of a lot off the top of my head of these type of like buddy cop recruitment stories, because it feels like one of those formulas that like you could do this with a lot of setups, and like the formula is just laid out right there, like the 3-act structure, like the Lethal Weapon movies.
Yeah, like there's already two established cops, and one is a wild card, and the other one does it by the book. But these recruitment ones are really good, and there's got to be more, and we just can't think of them. These are probably the two biggest.
Yeah, because from like a plot standpoint, it works very well because, you know, it's good to write in a character that knows nothing about the world that they're entering, because as that character learns about the world, the audience is also learning about the world. So you're not stuck doing a lot of like exposition dumps at any point. You can just have like the character walking down a hallway and being like, "Hey, what is up with this thing?"
Yeah, and
then the old grizzled guy can be like, "This is what's up." It's really well done. This movie's great. This is a really solid movie.
Absolutely.
So I mean, I would recommend this to like anybody that, you know, has not seen it. Like, definitely check out Men in Black.
Yeah, me too.
It's solid. It's like, like we were talking about, it's like popcorn flick, hour and 37 minutes. Get in, get out, and then do not watch the Chris Hemsworth one. I'll probably never watch it. Do you think that they should like try to reboot this again, if possible?
Yeah, I think they should add the 21 Jump Street guys into it and let Phil Lord and Chris Miller direct it.
I actually don't think it would be that terrible to do like a full soft reboot of, even if you want to do like literally just this movie again and modernize it.
So like a hard reboot.
Yeah.
Yeah, I could see it.
Because I think like, if you try to go too much into like action movie, like overly CGI, like globetrotting, like I don't think that works. I think you want to keep it as grounded as possible.
Yeah. If you had to cast this today, who would you pick?
Who's the old guy? Well, funny enough, I think Josh Brolin would be great in the Tommy Lee Jones role now.
Okay, you can't use him.
Having just watched Dune 2.
Yeah, I'm going to kind of flip it a little bit. For my young guy, I'm going to cast Donald Glover, but have him be the serious one and be the one that's like the veteran of it. And he has to, for some reason, bring an old guy into the Men in Black. And with that, there's so many like older comedians that could do that role.
You know what? I'm going to flip it even more.
Okay.
I'm going to be an ally here, Jason.
Good.
What's her name? Ayo Edebiri.
She would be so good.
As the Will Smith character.
She'd be great.
And
so true.
And then the grizzled old man can be like, I don't know, Queen Latifah. or like Angela Bassett. You could get like an auteur, like older black actress.
That would be crazy.
It would be like completely sick and tired of her shit.
For Angela Bassett to be in Men in Black. Ayo Edebiri that would be a very funny movie. I like your casting a lot for that.
Yeah, there you go. It's because I'm an ally.
Good. Good.
All right, so before we get into overrated, underrated, Jason, we got to figure out how this movie is rated objectively. Going out of, are we going to have 10 or it's at a 10, right?
Yeah.
So I think this movie is like a solid like 8. I think it's really good, and I don't really have a lot of like major like qualms with the film itself. I think like pacing wise, it's so short that the movie, it flows very, very well. And like once you get through like Will Smith like actually becoming like part of the Men in Black, you're like straight halfway through the film. So like the back half is just like the story. So you're just telling like a 45 minute story of them like saving the world. It works great.
I like the movie. Like it's probably like an 8 or 9 out of 10 for me. But general audiences, I mean, the one thing that surprised me about the Rotten Tomatoes score is I think it has like a higher critical score than audience score, which is pretty rare for a blockbuster.
Yeah, the audience score was 80%, which is interesting. I didn't go into like audience Rotten Tomatoes scores. Again, that's why I'm curious, like, is this a movie that would hold up a lot to like younger audiences nowadays? Or do younger audiences find this boring?
Yeah, so that's kind of like a question we can ask as we're going into our arguments. But yeah, I would also put this at an 8. I think I would trust that like Rotten Tomatoes score of how the general audience views this film. Yeah.
Yeah, the only real unfortunate downer part of this movie is that there's a lot of shots of the Twin Towers in this movie. They really were like World Trade Centers, aren't they really good looking?
That's how they tell you it's New York.
And then unfortunately, I don't think that character returns in the 2002 sequel to this movie.
Yikes.
Tough look. All right, so we'll go 8 out of 10. That's going to be our objective rating. Over under time, Jason, you are going to be overrated. You went for a very unique strategy for overrated this time around.
Well, as I've been gushing about this film, it's because I like this movie. I don't necessarily think it's overrated, but I have a friend who does, if I ask them, and their name is ChatGPT. So ChatGPT says, while Men in Black is widely praised for its blend of science fiction, comedy, and action, it can be argued that the film is overrated due to several factors. Firstly, while the film is entertaining and has memorable moments, its plot is relatively simplistic and lacks depth compared to other sci-fi classics. The narrative revolves around a secret organization policing extraterrestrial activity on Earth, but it often relies on comedic elements rather than exploring more complex themes. ChatGPT is so right here. The film opens with a group of immigrants kind of like crossing the border or something into America. And you're like, oh, okay, this story is like a metaphor for immigration.
For aliens.
Yeah, for aliens and alien immigrants. It's gonna take a stance on that. It's gonna be political. We're gonna get some real good nuanced thoughts here. And then it's not that at all. And if you do like kind of lean into it, the basic takeaway is that, this secret organization that no one knows about, monitoring everyone on Earth and having basically unlimited funds and power to do whatever they want is a good thing. So that's kind of problematic. For the most part, they don't really take a stance on anything when they could have. If you want this movie to really be considered like a sci-fi classic, you kind of have to have some philosophy or some thematic elements behind it. And this is really just like a fun movie.
Yeah, that is true. We're, obviously everybody's Dune-pilled right now, and nothing is more like philosophical and political in nature than the Dune stories.
Yeah, like when we're coming off something like that, like we watched that last weekend, we didn't walk out of Men in Black having the same feeling we did when we walked out of
these two films are in the same genre.
Yeah. This says that the characters, while iconic, are somewhat one-dimensional with little development throughout the film. I don't know if I believe that with Agent J, but with Agent K choosing to get his memory wiped and then going back to live his civilian life, I think that was like nice development.
That's definitely one plot point that I feel like if this movie was like 20 minutes longer, that would be the one element that you would flesh out more, is talking about these guys like before they became Men in Black agents. Mm-hmm. Because we didn't talk about this, but like when you become an agent for MIB, you basically forgo your identity. Everybody that ever knew you like forgets that you exist.
Yeah.
And like you're just an agent, like they like erase your fingerprints, they they get rid of like your face from like all of like records and everything like that. And that sounds like it's a really heavy choice for a person to make.
Yeah, and they just make it willy-nilly, and then when they retire, they lose all those memories of their time as a Men in Black agent, and then they just kind of have to go back to life after having not been in the world for 40 years.
Yeah, and I guess that, I mean, you avoid that because it's not that type of movie, I guess is the reason you would do that.
Yeah.
Because like if you gave Will Smith like a wife and a daughter,
Right.
and then you have him make this choice, it's like a way different movie.
I think you could have done maybe 5 minutes of like showing Will Smith being alone and like wanting to move on or something and getting that opportunity from Men in Black. I do think ChatGPT is right. There could have been more dimension to these characters.
Because that would be an interesting plot point too, because that's something we see a lot in these type of movies where you have a new person that's entering in an organization that's like really old and like set in their ways, that like they become like a fresh set of eyes to like bring about change in the organization.
Yeah.
And like maybe Agent J would be like the person that says like, why do we need to like forego our humanity to like be a part of this organization? Like, why do I need to like never see my family ever again in order to be an MIB agent? You know, don't you think that's like an archaic like rule, you know, that's like outdated at this point? Like if they did like a modern take on Men in Black, like I feel like that would be an element that would be really interesting to explore.
Yeah, kind of exploring changing the organization from within. I would like that too, and it would add a lot more depth to the film.
Because as the film as it exists, like the film it doesn't even step into that territory ever. It's like that's not a question we're interested in answering.
It's
So
just a fun adventure film.
Yeah, Will Smith just happens to be a guy with no family.
I do think that, yeah, you could increase the scope of these films by asking those questions, and especially because sort of like the take on big government organizations and surveillance has changed a lot since that first movie, since like the Patriot Act and all kinds of things. Like we would probably see it would make a much more interesting story to ask those types of questions and then try to answer them. ChatGPT also says, this is a good one, additionally, the film's sequels and spin-offs have diluted the impact of the original, with each subsequent installment failing to recapture the magic of the original. This has led to the perception that Men in Black as a franchise may be more about commercial success and nostalgia rather than genuine innovation or artistic merit. I kind of agree with that too. I wish they had just done better with the sequels.
I guess ChatGPT isn't aware that this movie was nominated for 3 Oscars that were all in art categories.
I don't know. It's right though that these sequels with the same team behind it just were not good, which means that maybe this was like almost like a fluke of a success.
You could definitely make that argument. I mean, if there's 4 movies in the series and only the first one is considered good, I mean, you can make a giant list of like franchises where that's the case, where the first one is like revered and then the rest of them don't live up to the same hype. Even though I got to go back and watch that second one because now I'm curious. Like, it's possible that I'm not going to like the second one on rewatch. Maybe like the pacing is like way off or something like that, or it just doesn't have the same juice to it.
Yeah, it's also highly possible that like the actors came back and they're just phoning it in at this point. Because I think that, like, Will Smith, we talked about how hot his run was.
2002 Will Smith is a totally different guy than 1997 Will Smith.
That guy doesn't care, and he hasn't really cared since. He did win an Oscar a couple years ago, but for the most part, he's been phoning it in since he turned, like, 30.
Yeah. He's too busy slapping Chris Rock in the face. We're recording this before the Oscars. Do you think that they make a Will Smith slapping Chris Rock joke this year?
Funnily enough, my roommates and I last year did like an over-under. How many times do you think they're going to bring up the incident? And I think I said under 4, and I think they hit like 5 or something. But they did jokes about it, yeah.
The craziest thing about that incident is how much the producers had to hit the dump button. You know what the dump button is, right? So like anything that's like a quote unquote live event on TV, you're always seeing it on a bit of a delay.
Oh, right.
So that the people like behind the scenes can hit a button if somebody starts like cursing or if like something like crazy happens, they're able to like bleep that out or like black that out. before it actually makes it out to like people watching it. And they were hitting the dump button like fucking crazy when the Chris Rock Will Smith thing happened, because like Will Smith was just like screaming obscenities at him. It's like now on the internet, like everybody has seen like the unedited version of Will Smith like saying, "Keep my wife's name out your fucking mouth," but like that's not what you heard on TV. You heard like very little like what they were saying back and forth, because they were just dumping everything.
Yeah, I remember being very confused as I was watching what was happening.
Yeah, you couldn't tell if it was a bit or not.
Yeah, that was nuts. So that guy, I could totally see him kind of slacking in the second movie and the third movie, showing up for the paycheck. You know, his run in the 90s is when he was really hungry as an actor, and he became like this big superstar. If you look at like his Rotten Tomatoes scores over the years, they all kind of started dropping off around Men in Black 2 and up until, I guess, King Richard.
Yeah, in 2004 he did iRobot, which I would love to do iRobot on this podcast. I like iRobot a lot.
Me too. It's fun, and that's another like neo-noir movie with a sci-fi twist.
Yeah,
that's also an action comedy.
It's an adaptation. Yeah, very well-known story.
Yeah. ChatGPT also says the movie's predictable. I agree with that. Lack of social commentary. We already kind of commented on that. Gender representation, not great.
Yeah, I would agree.
And cliched tropes. Yeah, so ChatGPT is really leaning into the fact that this is sort of like a very cliched, generic action adventure story that we've seen like a million times before. And I partially agree with that. Some of that, I do think the movie does what it's trying to do really well.
What do you think of the end of the movie? So the end of the movie, when Agent K is like, "This was my swan song. Like, I'm retiring after this. I found my I was not training my partner. I was training my replacement." And then he just gets neuralized and he's out of the movie. Like, do you think that's like them shooting themselves in the foot a little bit, ending their first movie like that after you've set up? It's a lot like Kingsman. Spoilers for the Kingsman franchise. They fucking blow up Kingsman headquarters in the first 10 minutes of Kingsman 2. And it's like, you just spent a whole movie setting this up and now you're getting rid of it?
You know, I think that they probably knew they wanted to make sequels to this if it did well. I think they were just trying to set up a situation where Will Smith and what's the female character's name?
Well, the actress is Linda Fiorentino. Dr. Laura Weaver, Agent L.
Okay, so Agents J and L would be like the new duo, and I do think that they would have planned to bring Tommy Lee Jones back in like a small capacity.
I think that was the original script of the film, had Tommy Lee Jones in a small role.
Right.
He was not like as important as he ended up being in the film.
Right. But ultimately, whether or not it was scheduling conflicts or there was beef between actors on set, we got J and K back. And really, like, Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones are the ones that have like the chemistry that really sold this first film and made it work. It's hard to know if they would have replicated that with Agents J and L.
I personally think it was a mistake that they had him neuralize K at the end of this movie. Do it at the end of the second movie. But at least like give us like one movie where it's like just them being partners the entire film.
Especially with the logistics of it, where he's like, I was training my replacement, not my partner, and it's been 2 days since Agent J joined.
He's like, what if you fucked up? What if he just did good on this mission and that was it?
Yeah, I do think it's a nice bookend because the film opens with this small scene and then Agent K neuralizes his partner who's older than him. And so they bookend that with Agent K making the decision to get neuralized at the end. And that's kind of nice, and you can't really do that if you save it for the sequel. But at the same time, I agree. If you're planning a franchise and you're building a franchise around these two solid actors with great chemistry, then you shouldn't have one of them lose their memory.
Yeah, it must have been a fucking nightmare to try to market the second film, where you're just like, oh yeah, Tommy Lee Jones isn't the star of this one. He's in it, but he's not the star of it.
Yeah, I'm almost positive that they did not play that for a twist in the marketing. I'm pretty sure they just had both of them in the suits in promotional materials.
Yeah, they did that with Kingsman 2 also, right? They were just like, oh no, don't worry. He's in the movie.
Yeah, they did.
All right, so is that ChatGPT's entire overrated segment? Or is there more? Oh my God, it wrote like a whole novel.
Yeah, that's about it.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely holes to poke in this. I mean, it's not flawless, and it's a silly film. So if you're not interested in like alien movies that are like silly like this, if you prefer something like Arrival, which is something that takes like alien invasion insanely seriously, maybe this movie isn't for you. It's possible. For the underrated argument, I think it's pretty straightforward. I actually think this is like possibly like the apex of like both Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones's careers to a certain extent. I think it's like straight up one of Will Smith's best performances. I think if you asked like any random person, like, what do you know Tommy Lee Jones for? Like, they'll probably say Men in Black first. Like,
Yeah.
unless they're like a cinemaphile, they'll say No Country for Old Men. But
Yeah.
like, just like general audiences, they'll think of Tommy Lee Jones as like the gruff, you know, older veteran guy from Men in Black. This is Tommy Lee. Even like more than Two-Face, I feel like, even though he's like insanely fucking silly in that Batman movie, this is just one of those films that was like a flash in the pan. Like they just like nailed it from all aspects. And apparently like there was a lot of like stuff going on behind the scenes, like with like rewrites. And like I was saying, like the guy that did the creature effects did not agree with the producers on a lot of stuff and then ended up winning an Oscar for that. It's just like one of those movies where they kind of like backed their way into a really, really strong film at the end of the day. You know, it's a movie that ended up being like more than the sum of its parts, which is always cool to see. And I think it's underrated in the sense that it's such an old movie and it holds up incredibly well today. And I know that the two of us have a giant hard on for 90s movies, but fucking 90s, man.
Yeah, like people say they don't make movies like this anymore, and I do think that applies to Men in Black. I don't think studios try to make a tight hour 30 movie that's just really good. I think now studios would be planning for those sequels to be coming out like a year or two later, and just like thinking too far ahead with that. And then when it flops, it would flop because they were planning wrong.
Yeah, Men in Black, it's a lot like the Ghostbusters franchise in that like they tried to soft reboot it, and the soft reboot completely missed the point of what makes the original film good. I mean, we'll have to do Ghostbusters on an episode because there's a new Ghostbusters movie coming out, and I have not seen the original Ghostbusters in a very long time.
Yeah, same.
Like Ghostbusters is like well known because it's a comedy. It's a comedy with ghosts, right? That's it. There's nothing like super like deep about it. And then these like more recent Ghostbusters films are just like giant nostalgia trips, and they're like kind of serious. And it's got like Paul Rudd and like a bunch of kids. It has no idea like who the audience for Ghostbusters is, which like the Ghostbusters core audience is like a bunch of dudes in their 40s. And the Men in Black is very similar, where like what makes this film great is that it's a nice, tight buddy cop movie with aliens, and it's super simple. That's it. You do not need like a big, like wild globetrotting, like CGI fest, ad-libbing fest between two hot actors in their 30s.
Right.
That's not what the movie is for. We want to see like old as fuck Tommy Lee Jones being too tired of Will Smith's shit, but like while also simultaneously seeing the potential in him, so much so that he recommends him over like all the you know, like the Green Beret and like the Navy SEAL, and like that's a great scene where they're filling out the questionnaire or whatever, and they don't have a desk, so he just drags the desk as loudly as possible across the room.
Yeah, I love the whole recruitment sequence because it shows that Agent J is someone who problem solves differently than all these more professional guys, and that he is ostensibly the one that can come in and shake things up. And you know, if you join the Men in Black, you have to have this eye for seeing things differently, and he does.
Yeah, and what's cool is that Agent K also was someone who was like not from this like big professional background. He talks about how like he was just a kid that stumbled upon this like alien event that occurred, and that's how he originally became part of the Men in Black. So like he was also just like a kid off the street, so he kind of sees a little bit of himself in Will Smith, which is cool. I love it. It's just like it's really good screenwriting.
It is.
But yeah, that's Men in Black for you. If you're someone who's like younger than us, if you've never seen this movie before, like go see Men in Black. It's really short, which we love. We always endorse movies that are under 100 minutes. So definitely check it out sometime. Jason, any final thoughts on Men in Black?
Yeah, I hope they make another one. I think it would be funny. And you know what? Let's not have them reboot it. Let's just make a straight Men in Black 4 with Will Smith and Tommy Lee Jones coming back as they're both old men now.
One last mission.
Yeah, exactly.
We got to slap the shit out of Chris Rock.
It would be funny if they added a Chris Rock as an alien joke into it.
Yeah, that's something that they started doing in the sequels, where they would bring up a little bit in this movie too, where they would just talk about random celebrities being aliens. Actually, I think like Michael Jackson is an MIB agent in the second one.
Oh yeah,
he's like a cameo.
Yeah, that's right.
Anyway, that's going to be it for us, guys. Make sure to like the podcast, 5 stars, all that good stuff. Remember, we're both on YouTube as well as Spotify, Apple Pods, all that good stuff. And check us out on Patreon as well if you want to get our episodes 24 hours early. For myself, for Jason, that's going to be it for this episode of the Over Under Movies podcast. We will see you at the movies.
Bye-bye.
Bye, everybody. A neuralizer. We'll see you next time. No, you won't.